This is a supporting video for the Dissecting Language Part 1 task. You can read at the top here that the goal in the task is to analyse what type of writing is used in the article below. In class, we've been talking about field as a way that we measure the context of writing. Sometimes when we read something, we can understand all of the words, but some pieces of writing are actually made for specific audience who already have different types of knowledge and understanding. This piece is an example of that. I've given you a section of text which is part of a review for Destiny 2. We can read here, Destiny 2 has been a welcome addition to the FPS RPG genre. Just in that first sentence, we can recognise that there's some words that we're really familiar with, words like welcome, words like has been, even words like genre. We might have a broad understanding of these terms, but there's also some words in there or some terms that we might not be familiar with, like FPS. Now, if you're a gamer, you might know that that stands for first person shooter. But if you can imagine someone who's had nothing to do with video games at all, that wouldn't make any sense to them. And therefore, we would say that this piece of writing was not accessible to them. Now, when we're analysing how accessible a text is, that's when we're looking at the field, recognising that some texts are more accessible, meaning anyone can look at them, and some texts are less accessible, meaning only people who've got certain knowledge can look at them. And in order to help us become better writers, we have to know where the texts that we write sit. So that's what this activity is all about. We've got some steps to follow down the bottom here. What you're going to be doing in this task is analysing the field of the article. So that depends on how much of the language in this piece of writing is accessible and how much is not. So the first thing I want you to do is to go through and highlight anything that you don't think an average person would know. Now, when I say average person, I mean someone who maybe has nothing to do with video games, okay? So who's never played it, might be a parent or a grandparent or someone you know that just has no idea about video games. So I'll give you one example. I've got this word here, FPS, that I talked about before. So that would be a perfect example of a word that is not accessible to an average person or a person who has no understanding of video games. Step B requires me to paste that word, so copy it and paste it down here. And I've already done this as an example, so I can see the word FPS. And part C is that I need to type what each word means in my own words. So I don't need to go and find a definition online for it. In fact, what I really want to see here is what does the word mean to you? So my example here was, well, it stands for first person shooter. I didn't look that up, I already knew that. And then I tried to explain what that means. So I said it's a type of game where you look through the eyes of the character and you have a gun in front of you. Your definitions in this case don't have to be perfect, and I'm not looking at your spelling and grammar, but I'm looking for you to show me your understanding of these different words. I've left a bunch of boxes here, but that doesn't mean that that's how many words there are. It's up to you to decide what words you think someone wouldn't be able to understand. Once you've completed this part of the task, you should have a bunch of words down one side and a bunch of definitions down the other. You should also see in this piece of writing that there's a bunch of coloured sections where you've highlighted some of those words or those terms. And that's what leads to the last part. If I scroll down to the bottom of the document, this is where I want you to tell me what you think the field of the article is. And we can see in my little diagram here, you're telling me whether you think it's accessible, that it could be understood by anyone without having to know anything, or whether you think it's completely inaccessible, as in none of it makes sense unless you're an expert on a particular subject. Now, what we find is that it's rare that something's going to be all the way one side or all the way the other. So what I want you to do is decide, is it more accessible or more inaccessible? If you think it's in the middle, then what you can do is just click in here and put a mark. Okay, but if you think that most of it is pretty easy to read, but there's a couple of terms in there that might be difficult for someone who doesn't know anything about video games, maybe it's over here. If you think, oh gee, there's so many words in here, and unless you'd played these games or previous games, you would have no idea what's going on, then it's probably going to be over here. I'm interested to see what you think about this piece of writing. Once you've completed this, you can upload it onto Dama.